In this video, I'm going to show you how I turn an outline, which I've created out of highlights from a book that I read, into a written summary of that book. So basically, I have an outline of all the main points and supporting points that I think are necessary to understand what a book is saying. But an outline is of limited value, right? People can't really make sense of an outline. It's too sparse. There's not enough kind of explanation. It's not easy to digest. So what I'm going to do now is open the outline on one side and then a new document on the other side and just translate the sequence of logic, the sequence of arguments from a hierarchical outline into writing, into paragraphs. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So here's where we left off with the first pass at an outline, which we created out of this note, which was the exported highlights from the original ebook. So at this point, I can just set aside the exported highlights and focus completely on the outline that I've created. This really, based on the previous steps that I showed you, contains everything that I want to include in my post, at least all the main points. So I'm going to start first by doing some cleanup. This was really kind of a first draft of an outline, and there's probably some improvement that can be made before I actually start writing. And I like to do this not as part of the outlining, but as part of writing, because the cleaning up and the kind of little kind of reorganizing that you're going to see now is part of kind of refamiliarizing myself with the contents of this note. You know, there might have passed days or weeks or even months since I did the previous outlining. So I can't assume that I'm going to remember or know everything that's included here. So what I'm going to do is kind of just go through and look for things that I want to change. You know, look for kind of improvements or things that are missing for when I sit down to actually just turn this into writing. What am I going to need? What am I going to want to know? So let's start here at the beginning. Okay, so this book, Work Clean, formerly called Everything in Its Place, is about the system of cooking called mise en place. So I think I'm probably going to want to start with that, which is what I thought in the first place, and it's why I have this whole section here. So let's see, I can define it using these points, probably just give a little bit of historical background. I won't use all of this, but it's good to have here for reference. I might just get this down here at the bottom, which actually came quite late in the book, and move it up here to the top because it's kind of similar to this point here. So I can kind of choose between the words in these two phrases. Historical background, okay, I think that's enough actually for this main point, or this first point. And what I actually might do is change this in size to something bigger. So it kind of stands out in my mind as this is its own section. Let's look at why does it matter, okay. Let's see. I'm still not really doing editing. I'm wanting to keep the language in the original language that I found it in, but I'm looking at the order. What is the order that I'm gonna wanna see these to be able to kind of riff off of it? Okay, so this is all about we invest all these things, but not in learning how to manage our work. This one is talking about what existing techniques lack. So is this one actually. So I'm going to indent that. It's kind of a supporting point for this one. And then this point, let's see. I'm really having to think through the logic here. Okay, I think I'm going to start off talking about what's missing. We've spent all this money and time on all these things for our professional life, but not in learning how to manage our work. Then I can say something like, we have current productivity techniques, but, and then I get into this, what they lack, what they're missing, that it has to be fluid, not static. And from that reasoning, this point probably needs to go down here, okay? Because what current techniques lack is not only that they're not holistic, but that they don't help us channel our energies, thoughts, and emotions. They sort of pretend that our energies, thoughts, and emotions don't exist, which I find is a big problem. Okay, so that's, I think, all I need for why does it matter. I'm gonna do the same thing here and make this bigger. Okay, so next section is, what does this have to do with modern knowledge work? Okay, it's about adapting to a changing global economy. It's about being more resilient. It's about organizing minds. So you know what actually strikes me is these points can actually easily be part of why, right? I don't actually have to have a section. What does this have to do with modern knowledge work? I can sort of ask that implicitly. And so I think I'm just going to include these in the previous section of why. You know, the need to adapt to a changing global economy, etc., is also a why. You know, an answer to why is because we have to, because it's urgent, because it's needed. So I think I'm just going to erase that. Okay, so it's interesting because there's such an abrupt transition here. Those first two sections were kind of obvious, what and why, but now we start getting into very specific ideas, like the importance of sequence, like checklists being a chef's external brain, immersive versus process time, finishing mentality. So what I'm gonna do is, what strikes me here? Okay, now I'm thinking of how I want this piece to actually be organized. So let me ask myself, what do I want this to accomplish? I want people to walk away with some takeaways, with some lessons or some principles that are just tried and true. They're proven through many decades of culinary experience, but principles and takeaways that they can apply to knowledge work, which is much less mature, which is much less proven. So what kind of takeaways do I want those to be? They should sort of be a mix of principles plus specific actions. So let me think here. Well, let's see what I can do here. I always like to work concretely with what is actually in front of me rather than, you know, theorizing in my head. So a few things I could do is, you know, I have these headings that I created previously to sort of summarize groups of points. So I could, after what and why, get into something, I mean, a really obvious structure would be something like mise en place for knowledge workers, 7 principles for structuring knowledge work. It's kind of a wonky title, and actually I just realized that would be a good potential title. Often the best titles sort of emerge from within the text of the book. So this is a potential title. It's actually not too bad of one. Is to say, you know, the main title communicates what I'm doing here, which is applying the mise en place system to knowledge workers. And then this kind of tells people what to expect and promises them what they're going to take out of this, of the time spent reading this, which is 7 principles. Okay. So I can delete it from here now and just say, what are the 7 principles? I actually don't know what they are, and I don't know if there's 7, but let's see if we can do this. So 1 here is sequence, and I can just get this whole thing and put it under sequence. I think placeholders might be on since I can tell just by looking how much I have here about placeholders, that placeholders might be on the same level as sequence. Okay. Let's see, this looks like I misplaced it. Oh no, it's because placeholders was under sequence. So this point, which is clearly about sequence, can now be moved up here, now that sequence and placeholders are their own points. Okay. Checklists are the chef's external brain. Especially since I only have 1 point here, it makes me think that's just like a kind of a throwaway line. It's just kind of like a 1-sentence observation. So I think I might move that, especially since it's so clearly related to my work, I might move it up here to the very beginning to give people sort of an anchor of how to think about mise en place in the context of the work from me that they've probably previously seen, which is all about having an external brain. So that's that. So what are these 7 principles? Looks like another one could be immersive versus process time. So let's indent that and unbold it. Finishing mentality, I mean, look at the volume of points that I have here. That is a really strong signal that this might be the main principle, or it might even not be part of the 7 principles. It might be like the overarching idea. I don't know, but I'm just going to put it into my list, and let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, these are also sort of meta points. It's kind of a couple overarching observations, which makes me think they should also go towards the beginning here. So what seems to be emerging from these points right here is something like an introduction. Right? Before I get into the details of what mise en place is, I probably just want to give people an on-ramp. Give them like a front door to just know what this, multi-thousand word piece is even going to be about. You can see that each of these points is sort of emerging. They were originally found in different parts of my outline, and they're sort of floating or migrating up towards the beginning because of the kind of points that they are. So let's keep going here. I'm going to make 7 principles big. Let's remove formatting. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like those are just continuing, so I'm just going to erase this and say speed is 5, balance is 6, arrangement is 7. Wow, so look at that. I just guessed that there were 7 points. 7 is kind of a nice number, and it looks like there are 7 points, which is one of those serendipitous coincidences that are constantly happening when you do this process. So let's see what's left here. There's not much, just this right here. What I'm going to look at, so these 2 at the end kind of stand on their own. Quotes could easily be like just a little list that I reference and try to insert these quotes at different points in the text. And then action steps is probably going to come towards the end anyway, so I'm just going to leave it right there. So really what we're left with is this section right here. It's points that were relevant and valuable enough for me to save and for me to take through all these different steps, but didn't really seem to naturally fit in the sections above. So one thing I can do sometimes is just do miscellaneous, right? If I don't want to take the time to go through these in depth now, I can do miscellaneous, and as I'm writing the rest of the piece above and I get stuck, or I'm lacking something, or I want to add just a little bit of insight, I can just jump down here and pretty quickly see what is sort of in the miscellaneous pile. Let me just quickly look through these and see if there's anything I really want to keep. Okay, so this, if you remember previously, was something that every time I saw it, I really thought it was important. I really thought it was important that a big side effect of having a system is that it allows small numbers of workers to scale their impact. So I think because I'm kind of doing this cleanup all at once, I'm reminded of a previous point in Why Does It Matter, which is the global economy changes. See, isn't that interesting? These points, these phrases or ideas were found in completely different parts of the book, but they're related. The global economy is changing. Actually, one way they're changing is another point I just saw, which is this. Job consolidation is really increasing the size of workloads. So I think I'm going to put that here. You can see here the logic. The global economy is changing. There's job consolidation, which is increasing workloads. Thus, therefore, we need systems that allow small numbers of workers to produce a lot, to really have a big impact. So these three or four points really kind of go together. And then right here, I have a couple of examples. What else do we have here? Actually, this is also related to that, right? Parallels between... So personal career trajectories become more like those of culinarians. Underneath there, these are some specific points about how, this is sort of the evidence for this claim right here, which is we're both under a deluge of tasks, we both have inadequate resources, so I'm probably going to want to draw on this. Let's see if there's anything else under miscellaneous. So neutral posture, neutral state, or 0 point. Okay, so this to me is about the parallels between digital and physical spaces, right? There's some interesting parallels, this whole point. And to me, that clearly has to do with something I just saw, which is arrangement, right? Like, why does the arrangement of kitchens have anything to do with digital knowledge work? It's because there are parallels between physical and digital spaces. So I'm going to put that right down here. Let's see, miscellaneous. I think that's it. These other points are kind of interesting, but nothing really comes to mind for specific places that I could put them. And that's fine. You know, not every single point needs to go into a pre-existing category like up here. It's nice to have a miscellaneous that kind of bucket that you can draw from, but I do like it to be as small as possible, right? If this was 3 or 4 or 5 times as large, it wouldn't really be miscellaneous. It would be its whole own section that I'd really have to think hard about. But because it's only essentially 4 distinct points, I can quickly jump down here, look at only the yellow highlights for anything that is relevant, and then jump back to whatever I'm doing. Okay, so that's the cleanup. I mean, isn't it kind of amazing and mysterious that what a few minutes ago was this incredibly chaotic jumble of ideas is now so clearly laid out in sequence? I mean, I didn't know there were going to be 7 principles. I didn't know that what and why were going to be the 2 initial questions I would have to answer. These things emerge. What I'm basically saying here is some of the big picture strategic questions about how to structure this piece, I don't have to answer. I don't have to sit there thinking really hard and come up with an answer. By working concretely with my notes, those answers arise. They emerge organically, bottom up, from within my notes, just through me making one decision at a time. It's something that I really find incredibly powerful and completely removes that feeling of stress and pressure that I have to come up with the answer and it has to be the right answer. I just really completely avoid that situation. So let's look at now really what this writing process is about. When it's time to begin the actual writing, once I've cleaned up the outline, what I like to do is to set up 2 documents, one on each side of the screen, kind of like we did previously. So what I'm going to do is get this note, make it its own window, and then if you remember from previously, drag it all the way to the left. I use what's called a windowing solution, a windowing app called Magnet, which automatically just saves you a couple seconds to make this window fill the left half of the screen. And then what I'm going to do is open a Google Doc. I like to do my actual writing in Google Docs because then I can share them for feedback really easily. So let's go over to Chrome, which is my browser. We'll open a new window, go to Google Docs, and then create a new doc. And for now, just call it Book Summary Work Clean. You can select that, make it the title, click up here, it automatically grabs the title from here and puts it as the name of the document. And then I want to get this window and put it on the right. So then you can see here I have the source outline on the left and then the actual document on the right. Okay. From this point forward, it's what people normally think of as writing. You know, people think of writing as, oh, you sit in front of a blank document and you just go for it. And I don't understand how anyone does that. It would be just completely impossible for me to sit at this document on the right and just start writing. And I think the reason for that is I would be trying to do the same 5 steps that we looked at all at once. I'd be trying to figure out which are the main points, what are the supporting points under those. I would be trying to put them in a certain logical sequence. I would be rearranging that sequence. I would be choosing which words to actually use and which words to change into my own language. I mean, it's a crazy number of things to try to do, not just all at once, but all at once in your brain. This organism that was designed to not do things at once, it's pretty much impossible. It wasn't designed to do many things at once. It was designed to do one thing at a time. That's really the reasoning behind dividing the writing process into distinct stages, is because your brain can only really do one thing anyway. And by breaking it up into steps, you can allow it to just do one thing in each step. Okay? So really, I think of this outline on the left as my support system. It's my scaffolding. It's kind of like I'm building a house and I already have the skeleton in place. All I have to do is add in the walls and the drywall and the flooring and the different appliances. It just makes it infinitely easier. Okay? And what this looks like is pretty straightforward. I'm basically just going to focus on one section at a time. It looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 main sections, which is typical for a blog post. So I'm just going to look at, say, these points and write an introduction, kind of picking and choosing. It's not exactly that I'm copying word for word, and it's not exactly like I'm making it up from scratch. It's something in between, right? I'm sort of glancing over to the left for what resonates with me, for what terms jump out at me, but then also part of my brain is kind of putting it into my own style, my own tone, my own personality. It's a little bit mysterious, I have to admit. I don't exactly know how it works, but it's sort of like, painting a picture with a model in front of you, right? You're painting what you see, but not only what you see, you're also in the process of painting, you're integrating your own ideas and your own perspectives and your own theories and your own priorities and your own lens into what actually makes it onto the canvas. And it's the same thing with writing. Okay, so this part is probably going to be in fast forward just because it's going to take some time, but I'm really just going to screen record the full process so that you can see what it looks like. And if you want to pause or slow it down, you're free to do that. So let's take a look here. Introduction. And the other thing to keep in mind here is this is just the first pass. Everything is just a pass. Nothing is ever final. Nothing is ever the definitive what's going to be published, right? This introduction, I'd say even more than other parts, I'm going to be revisiting multiple times. I'm going to get feedback from multiple people, so I don't have to think about, oh, these are the official words. This is the official version. It's just the first thing that comes to mind. It's just the first iteration out of many, many iterations that I'm going to be making. So let's see here. I'm going to try to think of a hook. So let's see here. I want to say something about I want to tap into people's existing kind of desire or hunger for a system. So I'm going to set that up as kind of something that will resonate with people, and then I'm kind of like a joke. There's going to be a punchline where I'm going to sort of say that that's not even the right way of thinking about it, right? So this was my first kind of pass at an introduction. It's a little dry. It kind of sounds, this is typically how I start. It kind of sounds like an academic paper, just like very direct. Here's what is the case. Here's what I'm introducing. Here's what I'll do. I have a feeling what typically happens is as I make passes, I add more of a hook. I add more kind of mystery, more spice. I make it a little more tantalizing. Because basically the purpose of an introduction really is to convince people to read, right? People start reading a post like this, especially when it's this long and extensive, with the question on their minds, which is this going to be worth my time? Am I really going to commit to this? It's kind of like watching the trailer for a film. You're just trying to evaluate, okay, am I really going to get the payoff that I'm wanting from my investment in consuming this thing, right? So let's see. So that's fine. I'm just gonna, again, the same principle. I want to move quickly, touch lightly. I want to keep the momentum going. I could get bogged down in polishing every single word and sentence to perfection, but that just tends to get me bogged down in overthinking things. So I'm really going to focus on just moving forward and then come back later for a second iteration. Okay, so what else can I use here for my notes on the left? So it's interesting. I kind of already naturally use this. What I think I might do, it tells them what to, instead of do, I can be more specific. I'm looking at this part here, manage our work. And so I can say, tells them what to work on next is a little more specific. This, I kind of like the idea, but it's too subtle for this point, so I'm just going to indent it. And actually something I like to do is cross out what I end up using. So that way when I come back to this part, I can focus on the parts that are not crossed out. Okay, so anything else I want to use here? So it's interesting because the clear place to talk about mise en place as an external brain is right here, right? This paragraph naturally, what you expect is to go from here straight into the content. But before that, I want to say why or how this is related briefly to my current work is right here, and say, so I'm getting the feeling that I can't really go through the whole introduction without saying what mise en place is, at least briefly. I don't have to get into the full, 7 ways of thinking of this, but I'm thinking right here, I could just say use mise en place, use a little dash and just say a series, So I'm trying to think of the briefest definition just to give people a taste. A philosophy and mindset, but also set of practical techniques. It's kind of a lot of big words, but I think it'll do for now. Chefs use mise en place, a philosophy and mindset, but also set of practical. Actually, what I could say is embodied in a set of practical techniques as an external brain. So I think I need one more sentence about what that actually means to use this thing as an external brain. So there's some clues here. Concretize thinking before movement, assist thinking during movement, and enshrine knowledge. So this is a little too in-depth for me right now, but I can kind of use the spirit of it. It helps them there's something here about like thinking through movement or thinking in action, or actually kind of like that, thinking in action. It helps them, well, we can also just say maintain discipline, so let's put thinking in action here. It helps them, let's see, what does it really help them do? It helps them repeatedly do the same things or stick to certain habits and templates in order to make fewer mistakes, move faster, maintain consistency, deliver on schedule. What's a way of summarizing all that? It helps them automate the repetitive parts of cooking so they can focus completely on the creative parts. Okay, that's probably going to need some work later on, but it's good enough for now. Okay, I can also add a link here to the book on Amazon, but I'm just going to do that as a comment so I don't interrupt my flow. Add link to Amazon page. Okay. So interesting. I kind of want to keep this introduction as short as I absolutely can, because that will increase the odds people will read at least the introduction, and they'll have a chance to kind of get sold on reading the rest. So I think these parts I'm actually going to move to what? To what? I think that's actually enough for the introduction. So I'm going to put a line through that text. The way I do that in Evernote is Control-Command-K, creates a strike through. And now let's move here. What is mise en place? Make that a heading 1. Okay, now I can focus on this part. Okay, so this is a very academic way of writing it. Let's begin. Next, we will examine, or something like that, sort of like announcing what you're going to do. And a good principle of blogging, where attention is so scarce, is not to say what you're going to do, but just do it, right? Showing instead of telling. So often I have to write that sentence first to realize what I'm doing, and then I'm just going to delete it and say, I'm just going to say what it is. Actually, where it came from first. And I remember this pair of sentences where he kind of talks about where the very beginnings of it happened and then where it ended up, which is a very effective structure for piquing curiosity. So I might say something like, Georges Auguste Escoffier So I'm kind of, normally I try not to copy this directly, but this is just such a great structure. I'm going to copy it mostly directly. At age 88 in 1865, 1935. I'm going to change it a little bit into more something that I would say. Had established French cuisine as the global standard and elevated the chef's position to one of honor. Okay, and then I just want to mention a few was his time in the military. In the chef de cuisine. So it's interesting. He doesn't actually say commanding officer, but I'm sort of adding my own color. The chef de cuisine, I'm essentially trying to make the link to the military more explicit, right? It's kind of implied in this paragraph here, but I want to say was the commanding officer. Underneath him were the sous chefs, his lieutenants. Actually, I'm going to reverse this and say were his lieutenants the sous chefs. Okay, and were various chefs de partie who ran the various stations. Including garde-manger, pantry, sauté. So you can see I'm kind of shortening things. In a book, you have all the space in the world. You can say this or that, and make lists and all these things. In a blog, I'm always trying to condense it to say the same thing or essentially the same thing in less space. So I'm just going to say, instead of cooking on the range, I'm going to say range cooking. Saucier, I'm going to say, I like adding all these examples. Fish and fruit. Okay. So these people ran the equivalent of a culinary assembly line. Okay. So I talked about the assembly line, which is what I wanted to say here. I definitely included all this. Don't really need to mention the Moulin Rouge, just isn't relevant to this short of a summary of the background. So I think I'll just cross out this, cross out all this, right? So, and I basically touched on this, where I talked about, well, let's see. The spirit of that sentence is that this is used everywhere, that it's almost a completely universal system, which is kind of remarkable. So I want to say, and this culinary assembly line, right, according to the same rules in nearly every commercial kitchen around the world. Okay, so that's essentially what I wanted to touch on here, was common knowledge. The fact that you don't have to relearn it in every kitchen you work in. Okay, so you can see I'm leaving things out, for example, this sentence, but I can always come back to it. So I haven't actually said what it entails. So I'm going to say it's a multifaceted system that includes, and then I can make my list, a philosophy, and I just realized I probably need to say what that philosophy is. A system, an ethical code, an array of, I think I can actually combine these two. Right, so I'm going to say an arrangement of ingredients. That kind of combines the array of ingredients with the setup. An arrangement of ingredients, practices of cooking. Oops. A mindset So it's interesting because first I was thinking I would have to say, okay, a philosophy, what exactly is the philosophy? A system, what exactly is the system? But that's going to make this list really too detailed. There's going to be like a paragraph for each of these. So instead I'm going to do actually what he did, which is just defining it in a very general way. So a philosophy, what chefs believe, a system. So it's interesting. A system is kind of what I'm using to describe mise en place as a whole. And what he seems to be referring to here, what chefs do, is really the practices of cooking. So I think I might get rid of system and just have 5 items and say, and leave that here. So what chefs do. What chefs believe, and I think about what chefs adhere to, an arrangement of ingredients, how chefs set up their environment, the practices of cooking, what chefs, I'm going to say actually not just what they do, but how chefs cook, a mindset, how chefs think. So isn't that kind of cool? We kind of made up, we really just made up a 5-part definition of what mise en place is. And then further flesh that out with this consistent structure, what, how. Makes it very, kind of puts all 5 of them on an equal playing field. So then you can kind of just in your mind think, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Use kind of the same template for each of them. And I think this is actually quite an effective way of describing what mise en place is. And actually, it's so effective, I wonder if it should go at the beginning up here. Because this is essentially answering where does mise en place come from, which is a different question than what is mise en place. Oh, you know what this makes me think? I can actually get all this and put it in the introduction. And then that allows me to start off what is mise en place, just saying this is what it is. Okay, so cool. So I've used this. I still haven't used this. So it's great because I'm just noticing now that he has a shorthand of describing mise en place, which is working clean, which is the revised title of the book. So it's kind of cool because what I can say here is just all these facets of mise en place can be summarized in just 2 words: work clean. And then I'm just realizing, I just for a second put myself in the shoes of a reader, and they're like, work clean, okay. Does that mean you wipe your knife as soon as you cut, like every time you cut something? Does it mean you are perfectionistic and keep everything spick and span? No. And so that just made me realize I have to define what it means to work clean, at least in a brief way. So I'm just gonna say clean as in, actually I'm gonna get rid of the quotation marks. Clean as in efficient, clean as in elegant, clean as in direct, clean as in without. I'm just gonna do a little brainstorm here. I'm probably not gonna use all these, but just see in the moment here how many I can think of. Clean as in simple, clean as in, what are the other meanings of clean? It's like clean as in clear, clean as in decisive, clean as in powerful. Okay, I'm gonna revisit that, probably get rid of a couple of those that aren't as clean. But for now, I like having all those. Okay, so Working clean relies on 3 foundational values: preparation, process, and presence. Okay, so now I've used this. I haven't used the 10 distinct behaviors, but I don't think I need that yet. Okay, so it's funny. What is mise en place is actually quite short as a section, which is interesting. So I probably need to either expand upon it if that's actually valuable, or roll it into another section. So let me think what I could do here. Okay, one idea I have is I need more specifics, I think. Like, what does it mean for chefs to know how to cook or how to think? And the idea I have, I mean, that's kind of obvious here, is to look at the 10 distinct behaviors. So I think I might open up my Kindle app, and I can see here each of the 10 behaviors had its own chapter. So I think I'm just going to go to the table of contents. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so these are the 10 specific behaviors. It's interesting because there's some overlap with what I identified down here as my 7 principles, but not complete overlap, right? For example, I chose to not emphasize planning because I think that is the aspect of knowledge work that is the most well-known and the most recognized. This is like arrangement, cleaning as you go. It was also not as important for knowledge work. This has to do with placeholders, finishing I definitely included. So you can see, you know, he had these 10 behaviors on an equal footing, dedicating 1 chapter to each one. I have a different take. I chose to emphasize different things, which completely makes sense for a book summary. So let me think here. Well, the obvious thing that comes to mind is to just say what the 7 principles are that I'm going to be covering, right? So what if I just said, you can see this section is kind of messy. It's not clear how these paragraphs relate to each other, but that's okay. I just want to get it on the page so then I can start playing with it. So I just want to put down, there are 7 principles that mise en place has to teach us about modern knowledge work. And let's just list those since we're here. Okay, so let's, what are they? Sequence, placeholders. I'm looking right here. Placeholders, immersive versus process time, finishing mentality, speed, balance, and arrangement. Okay, so this feels like it's going to come towards the end as a segue to the actual body of the post. Right, that's probably going to come next. So it feels like something needs to come here. So it's funny, I'm now realizing this is actually out of place here. I have too many frameworks. There's like 5 things, and then half a dozen different definitions of working clean, and then 7 principles. People don't want that many lists. So I think this might actually go in something like a conclusion. I don't know if I need to necessarily say it up front. So you can see as I'm creating the early sections, I'm also kind of creating the later sections. It's kind of, I see it as a rolling wave where the wave, kind of breaks and then flows into the next following chapters or the next following sections. I don't need to do it perfectly in sequence, A, B, C, D. I'm free to kind of jump around and to sort of push things into the future if I'm not ready to deal with them now. Okay, so I kind of feel like I want to say, well, let's put a placeholder here. I'm just going to say add more. And if I can be more specific, it'll help. Add more detail about how mise en place relates to knowledge work. Okay, not super specific, but let's see if we can give a pass on why does it matter. Actually, I'm not going to say why does it matter. The way I'm going to say that is what can it teach us? Okay, so let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can get into a flow here. So this is a line that I've actually used in several posts. It comes from, I think, an article I read by Venkatesh Rao that really struck me. This sentence really rang a bell in my head. I don't know if this is an exact quote, but something to the effect of, what's unique about knowledge work is that we lack a culture of systematic improvement. Almost every other skilled trade, carpenters, plumbers, skilled trades, they have built-in ways of systematically improving. If only things like deciding what is the best way to do drywall, or what is the best way to frame a door, or what is the best way to replace a roof. These sort of best practices get passed not only down the generations, but laterally from one skilled trade to another. And that isn't so true of knowledge work. Honestly, there's some really obvious best practices that so many people just don't know about. I mean, the most basic best practices of how to manage your to-do list and how to manage your calendar and how to manage information are just not known. It's kind of amazing. We don't really learn how to work, right? We just kind of get our first job and look around at what other people are doing and sort of mimic them. And so I want to kind of start with this as a lead. And in fact, I kind of just want to write what I just said. It's a good example of how sometimes explaining something verbally is a great way of testing what's going to work in writing. And so I'm going to say, carpenters to plumbers to just straight Okay, so this was an on-ramp onto talking about this. Okay, so it's such powerful language, I'm going to stick to it quite closely. So let's not need spend tens of thousands of dollars on our undergraduate, our college education. Thousands more learning our profession, understanding, and okay, investments. So So I want to say not just money, but time is really the big one. Most of us have never been taught how to manage our work, and very few ever master it. We spend tens of thousands of dollars on our college education and thousands more learning our profession and understanding how organizations operate. Let's see. So I'm going to create a parallel sentence. So we spend, and then we spend again. We spend countless hours and weeks and months studying new trends, gaining new skills, and consuming advice in books and courses. I'm going to stop right there, but I hope this gave you an idea of what it looks like for me to turn a structured outline that we built piece by piece into a piece of writing in Google Docs. That's exactly the process I follow every single week. It then goes on my blog, which is on WordPress, and really those pieces of writing drive my career and my business. It's really a powerful process to get a piece of work like a book that exists out there, compress it down, summarize it down into a blog post, into an artifact that other people can read and benefit from while spending so much less time than it took you. And actually, if we take a step back here, what's the big picture of summarizing books? Really, you can use the same process that we looked at to summarize anything, right? You could summarize a conference you go to. You could summarize what you've learned in the past year of your job. You could summarize a course that you took. Summarization is really just an essential part of the process of learning. It's learning in a way that is more concrete, it's more engaged. It's a practical series of steps that you can follow one after another to really integrate and absorb any kind of knowledge you come across kind of deep into your mind. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you give it a try. Please let me know if you do so, what you discover, what you learn, and please send me your book summaries.